It's hilarious to watch the kind of the feedback that we get from consumers, because of course some of the feedback is correct, honest analysis of things which are wrong within the game. Like for example, a crash is clearly wrong, and so people have a clear justification to be frustrated or annoyed at something like that happening. But it's also interesting to point out how many people kind of take sides on a variety of issues, which are very complex social issues. But since everyone's playing in one world together, and the experience can't be customized for any one individual, in the sense of when you play a solo player game, the beginning of the game will be the same for every person who plays it, or effectively the same for every person who plays it. In a world with 80,000 participants so far and growing, well, sometimes when players start, you're going to start in amongst very friendly people, and sometimes when you start, you might find a group of either boring people or a group of people who have attitudes towards life and how to play the game that you don't agree with. And that's both the beauty and the risk of creating something like this online world we've created. So we've spent the first few months of its operation here trying to fine-tune the game such that we kind of maximize everybody's opportunity for early understanding and early comfortable enjoyment, yet also retain the maximum capability for long-term uniqueness of life. Even with the outset, since we did a long beta test cycle as well, and actually, quite frankly, even before we launched the beta test, there were already kind of guilds and subgroups forming for various purposes. So when we went live day one, we already had a fairly rich community activity already. So it's evolved very quickly from there. And of course, the evolution, like you say, is very early in its long-term build. But almost immediately you saw things like, the game supports, a huge array of activities. There's about half the players participate in what you might consider adventuring, in the sense that they go out and hunt creatures or monsters and collect treasure and, build up their either magic or combat skills. And about half the community participates in what you might call the economy, in the sense of they generally hang out in towns, they develop their skills of creation and trade, and they kind of build the infrastructure that supports society. And interestingly, those people tend to be what I might describe as the better personal role-playing gamers. In the sense of, I'm a purist when it comes to the definition of the term role-playing games, and I think there are very few computer games which really classify as role-playing games in the marketplace. A role-playing game is, in my mind, a game whose structure encourages kind of theatrical play on the part of the players, and I consider role-playing kind of the most base form of play that goes back to your earliest play in childhood, where you would take G.I. Joes or Legos and, you talk about the adventures of these characters. That's role-playing. And a game which encourages that is a true role-playing game. So sorry about that digression. But how these communities are building again, first we have that kind of split. The next thing we have is the next kind of split that showed up is a lot of the early adopters of Ultima were kind of fell into two camps. One of which are the role-playing gamers, a la lots of old Ultima players. And another big camp is what you might call the Quake, Doom, Diablo players, who came into the game and immediately started to rampage, and their philosophy of life was bent upon destruction of each other and everybody else. Well, and this group of players, of course, cries foul play, to which we as the creators go, no, that's not foul play. It just needs to be very carefully managed within the fictional scope of the game. So that was kind of the first kind of split. Then another thing that came up as that kind of settled and as the rules of the game and the laws within Britannia kind of being to kind of draw lines in the sand of safety and the proper amount of safety and the proper amount of fear. The next thing that began is what I'll call kind of player-built cities and player-built communities. One of the things you can do in the game is you can buy hard assets like homes and castles and things of that nature. And we're beginning to see now, villages independent of the Britannian protection of the main cities start up in the world, which means these player-built cities have to self-regulate, self-govern, self-protect, which takes a pretty large commitment on the part of a large number of players to really pull it off successfully. So as those evolve, we've also had to help, even within game code, support that endeavor because we like that community emerging. And so people would do things like, you can, like I mentioned, you can build homes, and you can lock that home, and you can hire a guard to guard the home. But other very clever players would find clever ways to break in, so to speak. For example, people found that they could get into the inside of castles by using their carpentry skills to build crates and then stacking crates like a staircase, and invade the castle walls in that fashion. Some of the players went, "Hey, that's cheating," to which we went, as the creators, we went, "No, that's not. That's perfectly fair." Mm-hmm. However, we want you to be able to protect your home, so now we've added the feature of traps, so they can actually set along the battlements entrapments to protect themselves. So we're continually feeding these communities with new features to help kind of support the reality that's building. And what the players are finally now, after a couple of months of playing, realizing, I mean, even some of our most vocal complainers of 2 months ago have now become our most ardent supporters now, and of course they're playing the whole time through, as they realize, that no, it's, we shouldn't make rules to just stop things which some people don't like. We should provide people the tools by which they can discourage play styles they don't like. And so the community can build itself. And players are learning that new play paradigm, which heretofore has not really existed. A few days ago, in fact, actually started when I was out of town one time, this character who calls himself the Hulkster, kind of a, wrestling federation kind of thing. And in fact has created an attire which, looks very gaudy of that ilk.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. He, while I was out of town, sent me an email challenging me to a duel and posted this all over the boards, challenging me to a wrestling match. Well, since Star Long, who plays Lord British's kind of ally and opponent, Blackthorn, since he got the email as well, he replied to the guy and said, "Well, unfortunately, Lord British isn't available this week, but I'll take your challenge." And so they through the web, began to send these taunts to each other, and so that kind of helped build up the hype. And then it turns out before the event occurred, I actually returned from being out of town, so I attended as well. But the way we did it, and so the wrestling match was every bit as authentic as any other professional wrestling match you've seen. And so we actually out along some sandy beach, they built this wrestling arena. Hundreds of people showed up to watch this event, and including this guy Hulkster had a bunch of followers who were all kind of dressed similarly. They were kind of his part of the crowd, and Lord British's jester Chuckles was there to help officiate, and Blackthorn has a jester named Heckles, who's kind of the rude and obnoxious version of Chuckles who travels the world, so he was there too. And the Hulkster and Blackthorn wrestled for quite some time, and so they were punching each other, and eventually Blackthorn submitted and said, you win, at which point in time Lord British shows up, kind of a standard wrestling kind of thing where, somebody from the audience always jumps in and disrupts. So you get the idea. We had this very elaborately staged event. There was really a huge amount of fun because not only was it fun just to watch from the other player standpoint, but, the appropriate amount of jeers from the crowd, plus in Ultima Online, crowds can get unruly, which they did, and so we had to have tons of game masters on site too to be ejecting unruly participants and unruly crowd members and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. Currently, it's an unwritten policy, but we're probably going to publish it as a formal policy that we want to hear about player-run events throughout the world, and whichever one week to week we think is the coolest, we're going to go attend. And that'll, we think, will encourage players to want to do something that's cool to try to get us as Origin to go attend those in person. That's really kind of what we're doing anyway, but we're going to kind of formalize that. Plus, we have a calendar of events now, which has, at the moment, weekly major events and daily minor events to kind of keep spice up the activities within the world. We assume this is a lifetime commitment of sorts, in the sense of ultimately we presume that when we release, Ultima Online Roman numeral 2, that we'll find a way to migrate those players onto the next game. But until then, we're presuming this is, we're here for the long haul. Ultima Online Roman numeral 2 will be a whole new ground-up technology based very much like Ultima 9. And so that will not be an iterative patch that people can get. That'll be a new product they'll have to buy. However, mid-year next year, we hope to release a what you might call Ultima Online 1 expansion, which may be able to be downloadable or may have to be purchased retail. Odds are good, actually, it'll have to be purchased retail. But in addition to that, we're patching this game constantly in the sense of not adding geography. Geography and art are very large data-wise. And so those kinds of things will probably accumulate and release as a CD. Features, or at least as many as we can features, we're just going to continue to give people as part of their ongoing monthly subscription. That's kind of one of the things you get is continued improvements of features and technology within the game.